The Gulfstream G650 sliced through autumn clouds at 41,000 feet, its cream leather interior silent except for the hum of twin Rolls-Royce engines. Marcus Hartwell sat with his spine straight against the seat, fingers resting on the armrest, watching Seattle's skyline emerge through breaks in the white below. 45 years had taught him patience. 12 of those years had been spent invisible. Tonight would end that. Across from him, Rowan Cross tapped a stylus against an iPad, his reading glasses catching the cabin light. 48 years old, and Marcus's only confidant, Rowan had the precise manner of a man who counted other people's billions for a living. 7 o'clock. Bellevue Tower, 50th floor. Landon Pierce will ring the opening bell at 7:15. Bloomberg's running a live feed. 200 guests confirmed, including, he paused, meeting Marcus's eyes, Victoria Ashford, front row with Callum Thorne. Marcus's expression didn't shift. He'd expected this, wanted it even. Good. She'll see you walk in. Rowan set the iPad down. Marcus, once you step into that ballroom, 12 years of anonymity evaporates. Every tech journalist in Seattle will know your face by morning. Forbes will run the story by midnight. I know, and Victoria will know she divorced a man worth $847 million while thinking he earned $40,000 a year fixing transmissions. Marcus turned from the window. His suit was Brioni, charcoal wool that cost more than most men earned in 3 months. The watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe Grand Complications in platinum, had been handcrafted over 18 months by 6 Swiss artisans. Together, the outfit represented what Victoria used to spend on a weekend shopping trip, back when she still thought his money didn't exist. She made her choice, Rowan. She looked at a man in coveralls and decided he had no future. Tonight she learns what future looks like. This isn't revenge. No, Marcus's voice carried the weight of stone. It's truth. I'm tired of hiding who I am because I'm afraid someone will love me for the wrong reasons. Tonight, I stop hiding. If Victoria happens to be in the room when that happens, that's her burden to carry. Rowan studied him, then nodded slowly. He'd been Marcus's chief financial officer for 14 years, back when the company was still called Hartwell Ventures, and Marcus's face appeared on magazine covers. He'd watched the transformation after Celeste died, watched Marcus liquidate everything, shed his public identity like a snake abandoning dead skin, and rebuild from shadows. $40 million, Rowan said quietly. That's what you wired Landon Pierce 3 years ago, when every venture capital firm in the Pacific Northwest told him he was too risky. Morrison Biogenetics was 90 days from bankruptcy. You saved him. He saved himself. I just gave him rope that wasn't attached to a noose. Tonight he's going public at $2.8 billion. Your 17% stake is worth $476 million, and he wants to reveal his mystery investor to the world. Marcus looked back out the window. Seattle was larger now, the Space Needle a silver thread against gray water. Let him. The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin speaker, announcing their descent. 12 months earlier. The wrench slipped, and Marcus's knuckles scraped against the undercarriage of the Honda Civic. He didn't curse, just pulled his hand back, examined the shallow cut, and reached for the rag hanging from his belt loop. Around him, Dutch's auto repair hummed with the sounds of Monday morning. The pneumatic hiss of impact wrenches, the clang of metal on concrete, the staticky murmur of talk radio from the office. Marcus, you done with that brake job? Dutch Kovacs emerged from Bay 3, wiping grease from his hands. 55 years old, built like a man who'd spent his life lifting heavy things, Dutch owned the shop and had owned it for 23 years. He had no idea the man in the stained coveralls, kneeling beneath the Honda, had more money than everyone in this building would earn across their combined lifetimes. 10 minutes. Rotors are worse than the customer said. I'm replacing both front ones. Good man. Camry in Bay 4 needs an oil change before 10. Customers waiting. Marcus nodded. Dutch disappeared back into his office. The radio shifted to a commercial about debt consolidation. Someone laughed in the break room. This was the life Marcus had chosen, the one that felt real. He finished the brake job in 8 minutes, lowered the Civic, and rolled out from underneath. As he stood, his coveralls shifted, and for just a moment the Rolex Submariner on his wrist caught the fluorescent light. $15,000 of Swiss engineering, visible for less than a second before Marcus tugged his sleeve down to cover it. Nobody noticed. They never did. He'd worn that watch every day for 3 years, and not once had anyone in this garage questioned why a mechanic owned a timepiece worth more than their annual salary. The morning moved in its predictable rhythm. Marcus changed oil, rotated tires, diagnosed a failing alternator. At 8:30 during his break, he stepped outside into the parking lot. The October air carried the first bite of winter. He pulled his phone from his pocket and saw the name on the screen. Rowan Cross, Titan Holdings. He walked to the far corner of the lot, near the dumpsters, where no one would overhear. "Morning." Rowan's voice came through crisp and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Board meeting at 2. The Cascade Tech merger needs your signature. $120 million, all cash. Send the documents encrypted. I'll sign remotely." "Marcus, it's been 12 years. How much longer are you going to?" "Until I find someone who doesn't measure my worth by the suit I'm wearing." Silence on the other end. Then quieter. "Sienna called. She wants to know if you're coming to her play Friday night." Marcus's expression softened. Sienna, 16 years old, sharper than anyone gave her credit for, the only person on earth who knew every version of him and loved him anyway. "Tell her I wouldn't miss it for anything." And Victoria called again. Third time this week. The softness vanished. Marcus stared at the cracked asphalt, at the oil stains and cigarette butts scattered near the dumpster. What does she want? Same as always. Asking when you're going to really move in together. Says your apartment's too small. Says her family wants to see you succeeding. What did you tell her? That you're working hard, that she should be patient. Marcus closed his eyes. Victoria had been in his life for 18 months, married to him for 4. And every day the distance between what she believed and what was true grew wider. He'd met her at a Whole Foods, of all places. She'd been reaching for the same carton of oat milk, dressed in yoga pants and a tank top, no makeup, looking like someone who'd left the polished world behind. They'd laughed about it, talked for 10 minutes near the dairy aisle. She'd mentioned moving back to Portland from Seattle, needing a change, escaping her parents' expectations. She never mentioned that her family owned $200 million in commercial real estate. He never mentioned that he owned nearly $1 billion in venture capital. 2 people hiding from their own lives, finding each other in the organic produce section. "When I'm sure she loves me, Rowan, not what I have." "And when will you be sure?" Marcus didn't have an answer. He ended the call and walked back inside. The penthouse was 15 minutes from the garage by car, though the 2 locations existed in different universes. Marcus parked his truck, a Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles and a dent in the passenger door, in the underground garage, and took the private elevator to the 22nd floor. The doors opened directly into his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Willamette River. The furniture was minimal. A desk made from a single slab of black walnut, a leather chair from Poltrona Frau, 3 monitors arranged in a gentle arc. On the wall hung a Rothko original, all bleeding reds and blacks, that Marcus had purchased at auction for $512,000. Most people who saw it thought it was a print. He stepped into the adjacent room, his private changing suite, and stripped off the coveralls. Showered, dressed in a Tom Ford suit the color of charcoal, with a white Charvet shirt and Hermes tie, Cartier cufflinks, John Lobb Oxfords. When he emerged, he looked like what he was, a man who controlled an empire from the shadows. Rowan was already waiting, seated at the small conference table near the windows. Laptop open, documents arrayed in neat stacks. Cascade Tech, $120 million buys us 38% equity. They're developing AI-driven supply chain optimization. Revenues projected to hit $90 million next year. Marcus skimmed the contract, signed it with a digital pen. The transaction would go through 3 shell companies, 2 offshore accounts, and a legal structure so complex that even forensic accountants would need weeks to trace it back to his name. That was the point. Titan Holdings didn't make noise. It made money. Sienna sent a message. Rowan slid his phone across the table. On the screen, a text from Marcus's daughter. "Dad, are you coming Friday? It's the opening night. I'm nervous." Marcus typed back. "I'll be front row. You're going to be amazing." Rowan watched him. "How long until you tell Victoria about Sienna?" "I've told her I have a daughter. She knows Sienna stays with me every other week." "But Victoria's never met her." "No." "Why?" Marcus set the phone down. "Because once Victoria meets Sienna, she'll start asking questions about Sienna's mother, about why I have full custody, about how a mechanic affords private school tuition. And those questions lead to answers I'm not ready to give." "You mean answers Victoria's not ready to hear?" "Same thing." Rowan gathered the signed documents. "Marcus, you've been with this woman for 18 months, married for 4. At what point do you stop testing her?" "When I'm certain." Marcus stood, moved to the window. Below, Portland stretched out in its afternoon light, the city small and manageable from this height. "Celeste loved me. I know she did. But she also loved what my money could buy. The houses, the cars, the galas, where everyone knew her name. She died chasing the next upgrade, wrapped her Lamborghini around a cliff on Highway 1 because she was arguing with an interior designer about which shade of marble cost more. That was 12 years ago. It was yesterday." Marcus's voice went flat. "I gave her everything. She wanted more, and more killed her." "Victoria isn't Celeste." "No, she's worse. Celeste was at least honest about loving luxury. Victoria pretends she wants simplicity, then resents me for providing it." Rowan didn't argue. He'd heard this before. Instead, he said, "The Morrison Biogenetics IPO is confirmed for October 15th. Landon Pierce wants you there." "Seattle?" "Bellevue Tower, black tie, 200 guests, and," he paused, "Ashford Properties is heavily invested in Seattle biotech real estate. They'll have 10 people at that event." Marcus turned. "Including Victoria?" "Probably." Something shifted behind Marcus's eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then I'll be there." 12 years earlier, San Francisco, 2012. Marcus Hartwell was 33 years old and worth $400 million. Hartwell Ventures occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district, and his name appeared on lists that mattered. Forbes 400, TechCrunch's top investors, Fast Company's most influential. He'd built the firm from nothing, betting early on companies that later became household names. The wins came faster than he could spend them. His wife, Celeste, was 30, beautiful in the way that required effort and money. Personal trainers, dietitians, stylists, a rotating wardrobe from Paris and Milan. She moved through their world with practiced grace, knew which charities mattered, which galas required attendance, which art galleries signaled taste. Marcus loved her. He was almost certain she loved him. That morning, she found him in his home office, reading a report on a potential biotech investment. "I need $200,000 for the gala next week." He looked up. She stood in the doorway wearing Chanel, carrying a Birkin bag that cost more than most families earned in a year. "We spent $500,000 on the last one." "This is different. The Museum of Modern Art. Everyone will be there. We need to make an impression." "Celeste, we've made impressions. We've made so many impressions we've left dents." She crossed the room, perched on the edge of his desk. "You don't understand how this works. These people, they measure us by what we spend, by what we wear, by what we're willing to give. I understand that I'm tired." "Tired?" Her laugh was sharp. You're 33. You're not allowed to be tired. I'm tired of the performance, of pretending that spending money proves something. It does prove something. It proves we belong. To what? A club of people who confuse price tags with purpose? She stood, her expression hardening. Why do you always make me feel guilty for wanting beautiful things? I don't. I make you feel guilty for needing them. She left without another word. Marcus returned to his report, though the numbers no longer held his attention. That night, Celeste attended a dinner party at a tech billionaire's estate in Atherton. Marcus stayed home. They texted twice, once to confirm she'd arrived safely, once to say good night. Both messages were cordial, distant, the communication of people who'd forgotten how to talk. The next morning, Marcus was in a meeting when his phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. He stepped out of the conference room. Mr. Hartwell? The voice was professional, careful. This is Officer Chen with the California Highway Patrol. I'm calling about your wife. The world tilted. Celeste had been driving south on Highway 1. Late morning, clear weather. Witnesses said she was going 90 in a 55 zone, phone pressed to her ear. She'd been arguing, the words heated enough that another driver heard her through open windows at a stoplight 2 miles back. She never saw the curve, never touched the brakes. The Lamborghini, $350,000, custom pearl white, delivered 3 weeks earlier, went through the guardrail like paper, rolled twice before hitting the rocks below. The coroner said she died instantly. Marcus supposed that was meant to be a comfort. Later, the phone records showed she'd been talking to an interior designer, arguing about marble, Calicut gold versus statuario. One was $70,000, the other was $180,000. She'd wanted the more expensive option. The designer suggested the cheaper one was just as beautiful. Celeste had been shouting that beauty wasn't the point when she missed the turn. Marcus stood at the funeral in a suit that cost $8,000, surrounded by people wearing clothes that cost almost as much. They spoke in hushed tones about tragedy, about how young she was, about what a loss this represented. No one mentioned that she died because she couldn't differentiate between wanting and needing. No one said that the car itself had been a symbol of something broken, something that required constant feeding with money and attention. He buried her in a cemetery overlooking the bay, spent $200,000 on the funeral, another $50,000 on flowers that would die within a week. That night, he sat in their empty house, 12,000 square feet, 8 bathrooms, a wine cellar that held bottles worth more than cars, and made a decision. He called Rowan the next morning. Liquidate Hartwell Ventures. Sell the house, the cars, the yacht, everything. I want it gone. Marcus, I'm disappearing, Rowan, going somewhere no one knows my name. Where? Portland. My mother grew up there. It's a city where people care more about what you do than what you own. I'll start over. New name, new life. You can't just, I can, and I am. Within 6 months, Hartwell Ventures was dissolved. Marcus moved to Portland, filed legal papers to change his surname from Hartwell to Cole, and created Titan Holdings as a private entity so complex and obscure that even sophisticated investors couldn't trace its ownership. He bought a modest apartment, found work at Dutch's Auto Repair for the structure and the anonymity, and began investing again, this time in silence. 12 years, 43 companies funded, $847 million accumulated, and not a single person outside Rowan knew the truth. Until Victoria. April 2023. She reached for the oat milk at the same moment Marcus did. Their hands collided, and they both pulled back with the automatic politeness of strangers in a grocery store. Sorry, she smiled, a little embarrassed. You take it. No, please, I was just... We could share, she laughed. It was genuine, unforced. Unless you need the whole carton. Marcus stepped back, letting her take it. My daughter's the one addicted. I'm just the delivery system. You have a daughter? Something softened in her expression. How old? 15, Sienna. She's... He paused, unsure how to describe his daughter to a stranger. Everything. That's beautiful. Not a lot of men say their daughter is everything. They talked for 10 more minutes. She mentioned moving back to Portland from Seattle, needing space from her family, trying to figure out what she wanted instead of what was expected. She wore yoga pants and carried a canvas tote bag with a faded logo. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked like someone who'd chosen simplicity. Marcus believed her. Would you want to get coffee sometime? The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. I'd love that. They exchanged numbers. Marcus walked to his truck with a strange lightness in his chest. For the first time in 12 years, someone had looked at him and seen only a man. Not a bank account, not a reputation, just Marcus. He should have known better. The first 3 months were easy. They met for coffee at local shops, walked through Forest Park, watched movies at a discount theater where tickets cost $7 and the seats creaked. Victoria laughed at his jokes, asked about his work without interrogating his finances, talked about her job in vague terms, something in marketing, she said, for a real estate company. She never mentioned that her family owned the company, or that the company was worth $200 million. Marcus never mentioned that he owned $800 million across 40 investment vehicles. Two people in disguise, falling for the costumes. By the 4th month, things started to shift. How much do mechanics make? She asked it casually, over dinner at a Vietnamese restaurant in J District. Enough. I mean, roughly, 50,000? 60? Marcus set down his fork. Why? Just curious. I want to understand your world. It's not complicated. I fix cars. People pay me. I pay my bills. But if we're thinking long-term, if we're talking about a future together, I need to know what that looks like financially. Victoria, we've known each other 4 months. I know, and I really like you, Marcus, but I also need to be practical. He watched her across the table, saw something calculating behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and he'd chosen not to see it. If money's a concern, we can split things evenly. It's not about splitting, it's about building something. And building requires resources. They finished dinner in near silence. By June, she'd suggested he look for something with more potential. By July, after meeting her parents, she'd started making comments about his clothes, his truck, his apartment. Small observations, delivered with a smile. You know, you'd look great in a suit. Have you thought about trading in that old Ford? My friend works at Boeing. I could introduce you. Each comment was a test. Each test Marcus failed by choosing not to change. They married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Victoria agreed to keep it simple. She said she wanted intimate, meaningful, just the two of them. Marcus believed her. He didn't realize she'd agreed because she was embarrassed to introduce him to her extended family. That truth came later, at the first Ashford family gathering. The estate sat on 3 acres overlooking Puget Sound, 20,000 square feet of glass and stone, with a garage housing 8 vehicles, none of them worth less than $100,000. When Marcus pulled up in his Ford, the valet looked confused, as if unsure whether to take the keys. Victoria's mother, Margaret Ashford, answered the door in clothes that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Her smile was polite, professional, and utterly cold. So you're the mechanic? Yes, ma'am. How industrious. She led them inside, through rooms filled with art Marcus recognized from auction catalogs he'd studied when building his own collection. A Hockney, 2 Warhols, a sculpture that might have been a Giacometti, each piece worth millions. Victoria's father, Richard Ashford, shook Marcus's hand with the grip of a man testing for weakness. My daughter tells me you work with your hands. I do. Honest work, nothing wrong with that. His tone suggested there was plenty wrong with it. Victoria used to date a banker. Before that, a lawyer. But I suppose Love is love. Dinner was excruciating. 8 courses served by staff who moved through the room like ghosts. Conversations centered on real estate markets, investment opportunities, people Marcus didn't know doing things Marcus had done 100 times over. He stayed quiet, answered questions when asked, and watched Victoria grow smaller across the table. On the drive home, she was silent for 30 miles before finally speaking. They have high standards. They have cruel standards. That's not fair. They want what's best for me. And I'm not what's best? She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. Over the following months, the cruelty accumulated. Christmas gifts that made the disparity obvious. Margaret gave Victoria a Hermes bag worth $15,000. Gave Marcus a sweater from Target worth $40. A charity gala where Richard introduced Victoria as my daughter, VP of Marketing at Ashford Properties, and Marcus as simply her husband. A family dinner where Margaret asked, in front of everyone, whether Marcus had thought about his ability to provide for future children. Victoria never defended him, not once, and Marcus never revealed the truth. He told himself he was protecting something pure, preserving a relationship built on who they were rather than what they had. But the reality, which he only admitted to himself late at night, was simpler. He was testing her, waiting to see if she would love him without the money. She failed every test. September 2023. The Labor Day barbecue was held at the Ashford estate. Marcus stood alone near the back of the property, nursing a Budweiser, watching sailboats move across the Sound. 20 feet away, Richard Ashford held court with a group of men. CEOs, bankers, lawyers, the architects of inherited wealth. Their voices carried on the wind. Can't believe Victoria married a mechanic. We raised her to have higher standards. Maybe it's a phase. She'll figure it out. The man has no ambition, no future. How's he going to provide for my grandchildren? Margaret's voice joined them. I've been advising Victoria. Quietly. She needs someone on her level. Marcus heard every word. Didn't move. Just stood there holding his cheap beer, letting the contempt wash over him like rain. Victoria found him an hour later. Why are you hiding back here? I'm not hiding. I'm existing. You should come inside. Mingle. Your family doesn't want me to mingle, Victoria. They want me to disappear. That's not true. Your father just called me a man with no future. Your mother thinks you should find someone on your level. I heard them. They didn't bother to check if I was listening. Her face flushed. They're just worried. About what? That I can't afford to keep you in the lifestyle you deserve? Can you, Marcus? Can you really look me in the eye and tell me you have a plan? You're 44 years old. You fix cars for $40,000 a year. What's our future? Our future is loving each other, building something honest, not performing for your parents. Honest doesn't pay for a house, or kids, or any of the things normal couples want. We don't have kids yet, Victoria. Exactly. And I don't want to have them in this situation. What situation? This. She gestured at him, at his jeans and flannel shirt, at everything he represented. I can't depend on you. I'm embarrassed to bring you to events. I can't. She stopped, but the damage was done. Say it. You're embarrassed by me. I'm embarrassed that I need more than this. Marcus set down his beer and walked toward the house. He didn't run, didn't shout, just moved with the quiet certainty of a man who'd finally received the answer to a question he'd been asking for 18 months. He gathered his things from the guest room and left. Victoria called after him from the front steps, but he was already in his truck, already gone. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived by courier at Dutch's Auto Repair. Marcus opened them in the parking lot, leaning against his truck, reading the terms Victoria's lawyers had drafted. $50,000 in settlement. A handwritten note. Marcus, I'm sorry. We want different things. This money will help you start over. V. $50,000. Marcus made that much every hour through Titan Holdings. He called his personal attorney, Not the one associated with Titan, just a quiet lawyer in Beaverton who handled mundane affairs. Sign everything. I don't want a penny, just make it fast. Mr. Hartwell, she should at least know. No, sign it as Marcus Cole, mechanic. That's who she thinks I am. Let her keep thinking it. 3 weeks after that, they met at a law office in downtown Seattle. Victoria arrived in Chanel, accompanied by her mother. Marcus came in jeans and a flannel shirt, playing the role one last time. I hope you find someone better suited to you, Victoria said, her voice carrying the practiced sympathy of someone relieved to be done with an embarrassment. You too. I've transferred the $50,000 to your account. Use it wisely. Margaret added, That's very generous of Victoria. Many women wouldn't give anything. Marcus looked at her, looked at both of them, saw exactly what they believed, that he was a failure they were graciously helping. That $50,000 represented a fortune to someone like him. You're right. I'm lucky. He signed the papers, walked out, sat in his truck in the parking garage, and called Rowan. It's done. How are you holding up? She gave me $50,000 and thinks she's being generous. She pities me, Rowan. So what now? Marcus stared at the concrete wall in front of him, at the oil stains and the faded parking lines. Now I wait, I watch, and when the moment comes, I let her see what she walked away from. That's not revenge. No, it's just truth. I'm done hiding. And if Victoria happens to be in the room when I stop, that's her problem. He drove back to Portland, back to his penthouse, back to his empire built in silence. And he waited. 12 months passed in the systematic rhythm of accumulated consequences. Marcus continued working at Dutch's garage 3 days a week, not because he needed the money, but because the work kept him tethered to something real. He attended Sienna's school plays, her soccer games, her late-night conversations about college and future, and the strange burden of being the daughter of someone who existed in two worlds simultaneously. Titan Holdings expanded. 43 portfolio companies became 45. The net worth climbed from $700 million to $847 million. Rowan presented opportunities, Marcus approved or declined, and the machine hummed forward with the inevitability of compound interest. Victoria's life, meanwhile, became a curated performance on social media. Marcus didn't follow her accounts, but Sienna did, and sometimes she'd show him the posts. Victoria at luxury spas, Victoria at charity galas, Victoria with a new man, Callum Thorne, VP of sales at some tech company, earning $400,000 a year and thinking it made him successful. The engagement announcement came in March, complete with a 4-carat diamond and a caption about not settling, about finding someone who matched her ambition. Marcus read it once, felt nothing, or told himself he felt nothing. And then, in late September, the invitation arrived. Morrison Biogenetics IPO celebration. October 15th, Bellevue Tower, black tie, 200 guests. Landon Pierce wanted to publicly thank his anonymous investor, wanted to reveal the identity of the person who'd saved his company. Rowan brought the invitation to Marcus's office. Landon's giving you the option. He'll respect your privacy if you decline, but if you attend, I'll attend. Marcus, Ashford Properties has significant investments in Seattle biotech real estate. Victoria will be there. I know. This will be public, live streamed. Every tech journalist on the West Coast will cover it. Good. You're certain? Marcus looked at the invitation, at the embossed lettering and the formal language. 12 years of hiding, of testing, of trying to find someone who would love him without the money. 20 years of discovering that everyone, Celeste, Victoria, even well-meaning strangers, looked at wealth first and humanity second. He was tired of the disguise. I'm certain. So now at 41,000 feet, with Seattle growing larger through the window, Marcus Hartwell prepared to step back into the light. Not as revenge, not as vindication, simply as truth. the plane began its descent. The Four Seasons Seattle occupied a tower of steel and glass in the heart of downtown, its presidential suite offering views that stretch from Elliott Bay to the Cascade Mountains. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching ferries cross dark water while the city prepared for evening. Behind him, the suite's living room held furniture worth more than most people's cars. Italian leather, hand-carved wood, art selected by consultants who understood that wealth required curation. His garment bag hung in the bedroom, containing the Tom Ford tuxedo he'd wear in 90 minutes. But for now, he remained in the hotel robe, a glass of Macallan 25 in his hand, expensive enough that each sip cost what he used to charge for an oil change at Dutch's garage. The phone on the marble counter buzzed. Sienna's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." Her voice carried across 300 miles, bright and nervous. "Dad, are you okay? I saw the event listing online. Bloomberg's covering it live." "I'm fine. You're about to tell 200 people who you really are, after 12 years of hiding. That's not fine, that's terrifying." Marcus smiled despite himself. 16 years old, and she understood him better than anyone twice her age. "Maybe terrifying is what I need." "Is she going to be there? Victoria?" The name settled into the sweet silence like sediment in still water. "Probably." "Good." Sienna's voice hardened in a way that reminded Marcus of her mother. Not Celeste, but the woman Celeste could have been if she'd cared about substance over surfaces. "Let her see what she threw away." "That's not why I'm doing this." "I know, Dad. You're doing it because you're tired of pretending to be smaller than you are. But if Victoria gets humiliated in the process, that's just karma doing its job." "You're frighteningly wise for someone who can't legally vote. I learned from the best. Now go put on that tuxedo and show Seattle what a billionaire looks like when he's been fixing their transmissions for spare change." They talked for another 10 minutes, about her upcoming Stanford interview, about a boy in her AP English class who'd asked her to homecoming, about whether Marcus would drive down for Thanksgiving or if she'd take the train to Portland. Normal things. The kind of conversation that reminded him why he'd built walls around his identity in the first place. Not to hide wealth, but to protect the people who loved him, regardless of it. After hanging up, Marcus showered and began the transformation. Each element had been selected with precision. Charvet dress shirt with French cuffs, Hermes bow tie in midnight blue, Cartier platinum cufflinks shaped like geometric abstractions. The tuxedo fit as if it had been grown rather than tailored. John Lobb patent leather Oxfords that had required 3 fittings and cost more than most wedding rings. The watch was last. He opened the leather case and removed the Patek Philippe Grand Complications, reference 5270G. White gold case, slate gray dial, perpetual calendar with moon phase. It had taken 18 months to manufacture and cost $180,000. Marcus had bought it to celebrate Titan Holdings crossing the 500 million threshold. He'd worn it exactly twice, once at the private purchase ceremony in Geneva, once alone in his penthouse on New Year's Eve when Sienna was with her grandmother. Tonight would be the 3rd time, and the first time anyone outside Rowan would see it on his wrist. He fastened the clasp, adjusted his cuffs, and studied his reflection in the suite's full-length mirror. The man looking back bore only superficial resemblance to the mechanic who changed brake pads that morning at Dutch's. This version was polished, powerful, the kind of presence that commanded attention simply by existing in a room. This was who he'd been 12 years ago, who he'd chosen to stop being, and who he was about to become again. His phone buzzed with a text from Rowan. "Cars downstairs. Showtime." Marcus took one last look at Seattle's skyline, then headed for the elevator. The Rolls-Royce Phantom waited at the hotel's private entrance, midnight blue with chrome accents that caught the streetlights. The chauffeur, a man in his 50s with military posture, opened the rear door without a word. Marcus settled into leather seats so soft they felt like a moral failure. Traffic moved with Friday evening sluggishness through downtown, but Marcus barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the folder Rowan had left on the seat, a dossier on tonight's attendees. 200 names, each with a brief bio. He flipped through until he found what he was looking for. Victoria Ashford, 38, Director of Marketing, Ashford Properties. Net worth, family, $200 million. Recently engaged to Callum Thorne, VP Sales, TechVantage Solutions. Comp, $400,000. RSVP confirmed, front row seating. Marcus closed the folder. 12 months since the divorce. 12 months since she'd handed him $50,000 and thought she was being generous. In that time, Titan Holdings had made $147 million through strategic exits and 3 new investments. In that time, Victoria had posted 43 photos on social media, each one a performance of happiness that required the right lighting, the right filter, the right audience. The Phantom glided through downtown Seattle, past Amazon's biospheres and Microsoft's downtown offices, past restaurants where reservations required connections more than money. The city had transformed since Marcus lived here in his Hartwell Ventures days. More tech campuses, more cranes, more people who'd arrived in the last 5 years chasing the same gold rush that had built San Francisco a decade earlier. Bellevue Tower appeared ahead, 50 floors of steel and glass on the eastern shore of Lake Washington, its top 5 floors devoted to Morrison Biogenetics' new headquarters. The company that had been 90 days from bankruptcy 3 years ago. The company Marcus had saved with a $40 million wire transfer and an ironclad NDA. Tonight, Landon Pierce would break that NDA with Marcus's permission, would tell 200 people in Bloomberg's live stream audience exactly who'd funded the miracle. The Phantom pulled up to the red carpet. Camera flashes erupted immediately, photographers positioned to capture arriving VIPs for the tech blogs and business journals that track such things. Marcus waited while the chauffeur circled to open his door. The moment his Oxford touched pavement, the energy shifted. Conversations near the entrance stuttered. A photographer lowered her camera, confusion crossing her face as she tried to place him. Sir, what's your name?" Another photographer, younger, more aggressive, pushed forward. Marcus smiled but didn't slow. "You'll know soon enough." He walked through the lobby, all marble and water features and abstract sculptures that probably cost 6 figures, and approached the elevator bank marked Private Event. A young woman with an iPad checked his name against the guest list. "Mr. Hartwell, welcome. Top floor directly to your right when you exit." The elevator rose with the smooth silence of German engineering. Marcus watched Seattle shrink through the glass walls, the city spreading out in every direction, lights beginning to glow as dusk settled. Somewhere down there, in a corner of the industrial district, Dutch's auto repair would be closing for the night. Dutch would be locking the bays, checking tomorrow's schedule, never imagining that his best mechanic was currently ascending toward a room full of people who collectively controlled billions. The doors opened onto the 50th floor. The ballroom stretched across the entire northern side of the building, 12,000 square feet of open space, with windows offering unobstructed views of the Olympic Mountains. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from a ceiling 20 feet high. Round tables for 10 dotted the room, each draped in white linen, each centerpiece a careful arrangement of orchids that had probably been flown in from somewhere tropical. At the far end, a stage held a podium and an enormous LED screen currently displaying the Morrison Biogenetics logo. The crowd was exactly what Marcus expected. Tech executives in tuxedos that cost less than his, venture capitalists who'd made fortunes betting on companies like the one being celebrated tonight, a handful of Seattle old money who diversified into biotech because it was fashionable. Everyone held champagne flutes filled with Cristal. Everyone smiled with the practiced ease of people who attended these things quarterly. Marcus accepted a glass from a passing waiter and scanned the room with the methodical patience of a predator selecting prey. It took less than 30 seconds to locate Victoria. Front row, third table from the left. She wore a Dior gown that probably cost $18,000. He recognized the cut from a fashion show Celeste had dragged him to a lifetime ago. Her hair was styled in loose waves that looked effortless, but had likely required 3 hours and a professional. The 4-carat engagement ring on her left hand caught the chandelier light like a signal flare. Next to her sat Callum Thorne, 42 years old according to the dossier, with the build of someone who paid for a gym membership but rarely used it. His tuxedo was Hugo Boss, off the rack, the kind of thing you bought at Nordstrom when you needed to look successful without understanding the difference between expensive and valuable. He leaned close to Victoria, whispering something that made her smile. Marcus felt nothing, or convinced himself he felt nothing. The distinction had stopped mattering months ago. He moved through the room, accepting greetings from people who didn't know him, but recognized quality when they saw it. A venture capitalist from Andreessen Horowitz introduced himself and asked which firm Marcus worked for. A biotech CEO from San Diego inquired about his portfolio. Each time Marcus deflected with practiced vagueness. I invest quietly. Private vehicles. Prefer to stay off the radar. They'd know everything in 45 minutes. He was halfway to the bar when Victoria turned, and their eyes met across 30 feet of expensive carpet. Recognition didn't come immediately. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger who seems vaguely familiar, an actor you can't quite place, a face from an old photograph. Her eyes traveled over his tuxedo, the watch, the way he carried himself with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd been wealthy so long he'd forgotten to perform it. Then something clicked. Her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to the beginning of horror. Marcus raised his champagne glass in a silent toast, took a sip, didn't break eye contact. Victoria's face went pale. The champagne flute trembled in her hand. Callum noticed her distraction and followed her gaze. Saw Marcus, registered nothing beyond a well-dressed stranger. He said something to Victoria, probably asking if she was all right, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at Marcus like he'd materialized from a nightmare she thought was safely buried. Marcus turned away and continued toward the bar. Behind him, he felt her watching, felt the questions beginning to form, felt the architecture of her certainty starting to crack. Good. 20 feet from the bar, a hand landed on Marcus's shoulder. He turned to find Rowan, looking slightly disheveled in his Armani tuxedo, iPad tucked under one arm. You made it. Did you doubt? No, but I worried you might decide at the last second that this was a terrible idea. Marcus accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server. It probably is a terrible idea. That's what makes it necessary. Victoria's here, front row, can't take her eyes off you. I noticed. Callum Thorne's with her. Looks like a used car salesman wearing his father's tuxedo. That's unkind to used car salesmen. Rowan pulled up something on his iPad. Landon's speech is scheduled for 7:30. He'll talk for 8 minutes about the company's journey, thank various investors and board members, then, at the 10-minute mark, he'll introduce you. How does he plan to do it? He'll tell the story. 3 years ago, mystery investor, 40 million when no one else would take the risk. Company saved, therapies developed, lives changed. Then he'll reveal that the investor was Titan Holdings. Then he'll reveal that you're Titan Holdings. Then you walk on stage and he hands you the microphone. And Bloomberg's live streaming all of it? 50,000 viewers at last check. Could hit 100,000 by the time you're introduced. Marcus sipped his champagne. Cristal, properly chilled, worth about $40 per glass. He drunk it hundreds of times before Celeste died. Hadn't touched it once in the 12 years since. The taste was exactly as he remembered. Expensive, excellent, and utterly pointless. Any last advice, Rowan? Don't smile too much. People distrust wealthy men who look happy. Anything else? Remember why you're doing this. You're not here to hurt Victoria. You're here to stop hiding. Marcus nodded, but they both knew the truth was more complicated. Yes, he was tired of hiding. Yes, he wanted to reclaim his identity. But if those goals happened to intersect with Victoria being in the room when the truth detonated, that wasn't revenge. That was just geography. The lights dimmed. A voice over the sound system requested that everyone take their seats. The show was beginning. Marcus and Rowan found their table near the back. Landon had offered front row seating, but Marcus declined. Better to remain invisible until the reveal. Better to let the moment build. The table's other occupants introduced themselves. A patent attorney from Boston, two pharmaceutical executives from San Diego, a biotech researcher from Johns Hopkins, and their respective spouses. Pleasant people with impressive credentials, making conversation that required just enough attention to seem engaged without actually demanding thought. Victoria sat 40 feet away. Marcus had a clear line of sight to her profile. Every few minutes she'd turn slightly, scanning the room, her eyes searching, looking for him, trying to understand what she'd seen. Callum kept leaning in, clearly asking questions, but Victoria's responses were distracted, mechanical. On stage, the CEO of Morrison Biogenetics, a man named Landon Pierce who looked younger than 38, despite being exactly that age, stepped to the podium. The crowd settled into attentive silence. Bloomberg's cameras, positioned on tripods at strategic angles, captured everything. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Landon's voice carried the practiced ease of someone who'd spent the last 3 months doing media training. 3 years ago, Morrison Biogenetics was 90 days from bankruptcy. We had groundbreaking gene therapies for rare diseases. We had FDA approval pathways. We had a team of brilliant scientists. What we didn't have was money. The LED screen behind him lit up with photos, laboratories, researchers in white coats, children in hospital beds, the emotional architecture of a good story. Every venture capital firm in Seattle told us no, too risky, too expensive, not enough proven market. I'd mortgaged my house, maxed out credit cards, borrowed from family. My co-founders and I were sleeping in the lab because we couldn't afford rent. We were done. Marcus watched Victoria. She was leaning forward slightly, drawn into the narrative despite herself. And then, Landon paused for effect. I received an email from a company called TH Capital. They said they'd reviewed our research. They believed in our mission. They wanted to invest. The screen changed, showing a redacted email. Mr. Pierce, we believe in what you're building. $40 million will be wired within 48 hours. Only condition, NDA. Our identity remains confidential. TH Capital. Representative gasps rippled through the crowd. 40 million from an anonymous source was the kind of story that became legend. I thought it was a scam, Landon continued. Probably Nigerian prince, right? Polite laughter. But 48 hours later, the money appeared. No strings attached, no board seat demanded. Just build something that matters. Marcus saw Victoria's hand go to her throat, saw Callum whisper something urgent, saw her shake her head, still watching the stage. Over 3 years, that investment saved lives. We developed 3 gene therapies. We treated 2,000 patients with diseases that had no other options. Children who would have died are now thriving. And I haven't revealed my mystery investor, but tonight, with their permission, I want to introduce the person who bet on us when no one else would. The applause died. 200 people leaned forward. TH Capital represents Titan Holdings, a private investment firm based in Portland, Oregon. They manage a portfolio of $847 million. They've funded 43 companies over the past 12 years. They're one of the most successful silent investors in the Pacific Northwest. Margaret Ashford, seated in the front row next to Richard, pulled out her phone, started typing. Marcus knew exactly what she was searching. Titan Holdings, Portland. Titan's 17% stake in Morrison Biogenetics is now worth, Landon glanced at the screen, $476 million. More gasps. Someone felt the familiar calm that came before significant moments. This was it. The moment when 12 years of carefully constructed anonymity collapsed into permanent visibility. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Marcus Hartwell, founder and CEO of Titan Holdings. The spotlight swung toward the back of the room, found Marcus, illuminated him like a specimen under glass. For 3 seconds, no one moved. The room hung suspended in collective confusion, trying to reconcile the name with the face, the wealth with the stranger. Then recognition spread like fire through dry timber. Someone near the front started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, applauding a man most of them had never heard of, but all of them now understood was important. Marcus stood, straightened his tuxedo jacket, began walking toward the stage. The aisle stretched 40 feet, but felt like 40 miles. Every step carried weight. Every face he passed registered shock, curiosity, calculation. Cameras tracked his movement. Bloomberg's live stream count hit 82,000 viewers. And Victoria sat frozen in her chair, face drained of color, champagne glass forgotten in her hand. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Next to her, Callum had gone rigid, his expression cycling through confusion to understanding to something approaching fear. Marcus reached the stage, climbed the 3 steps, shook Landon's hand. The younger man was crying openly now, not ashamed of it. "Thank you," Landon managed. "Thank you for everything." Marcus accepted the microphone, turned to face 200 people who thought they'd known who mattered in Seattle tech, but were now recalculating everything. "Thank you, Landon, but the credit belongs to you." His voice carried through the sound system, amplified but not distorted. "I provided capital. You provided courage. Those aren't the same thing." Applause. Marcus waited for it to subside. "I don't usually reveal myself at these events. I prefer working in silence, but tonight..." He paused, let his eyes sweep the room, briefly touching Victoria before moving on. "I'm tired of hiding who I am because I'm afraid of how people will see me." The words landed with more weight than Marcus had intended. He saw understanding dawn on several faces, saw people realize this was about more than just business. "For 12 years, I've invested anonymously because I wanted to fund ideas, not personalities. I wanted founders to build companies without the pressure of a famous name attached. But I also," another pause, "wanted to know if anyone would value me for who I am rather than what I have." Complete silence now. Even the servers had stopped moving. That's a foolish test, an unfair one, because money changes everything. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, how they decide whether you're worth their time. He looked directly at Victoria. "Sometimes it's easier to know the truth when people think you have nothing." Victoria's eyes were wet. Her hand trembled against the table. "Landon Pierce didn't care who I was when he accepted my investment. He cared that I believed in his work. That's the only transaction that matters. The rest," Marcus gestured vaguely at the room, "the wealth, the performance, is just noise." He handed the microphone back to Landon, started to step away from the podium. "Mr. Hartwell," a voice from the crowd. A tech journalist Marcus recognized from TechCrunch. "Can we ask a few questions?" Marcus paused. "2 questions, then I'm just another guest." The journalist stood. "Titan Holdings has been anonymous for over a decade. Why reveal yourself now?" "Because hiding stopped serving its purpose." "Which was?" "That's 3 questions," polite laughter. "But I'll answer. The purpose was to protect myself from people who might love the wrong parts of me. Turns out, hiding doesn't protect you. It just delays the inevitable disappointment." Another journalist, this one from Bloomberg. "Your portfolio is worth $847 million. Some estimates put your personal wealth even higher. How did you accumulate that while staying completely off the radar?" Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Compound interest in patience. Also, I never needed anyone to know I was successful. The numbers knew. That was enough. He stepped off the stage. The applause followed him back up the aisle, but Marcus barely heard it. His attention was fixed on Victoria, who'd finally stood, who was moving toward him with jerky, desperate movements. Callum followed her, one hand reaching for her arm, but she pulled away. They met near the bar. Victoria's makeup had run slightly, tracks of mascara visible at the corners of her eyes. Marcus, her voice broke on his name. Your Titan Holdings? Yes. You're worth, she couldn't finish the sentence. 847 million, last valuation. You were always, even when you divorced me for being a mechanic who made 40,000 a year? Yes, I was always this. Callum arrived, puffing slightly, his face flushed. Victoria, we should... He finally looked at Marcus, really looked, and whatever he saw made him stop talking. You let me think you were poor. Victoria's hands were shaking. You let my family humiliate you. You let me... She stopped, swallowed hard. You let me divorce you for having no future. I didn't let you do anything, Victoria. You made choices based on what you saw. I just didn't correct your assumptions. That's the same as lying. Is it? I told you I was a mechanic. That's true. I work at Dutch's garage 3 days a week. I told you I made enough to live on. Also true. I just didn't specify how much enough meant. You should have told me. Marcus studied her. The Dior gown, the professional styling, the engagement ring that probably cost more than most people's cars, but was still just a fraction of what he could have bought her. What he had bought Celeste, back when he thought expensive gifts equaled love. Why? So you could love me for the right reasons? I spent 18 months waiting for you to love me despite thinking I had nothing. You failed that test, Victoria. Every single day you failed it. That's not fair. You told your family I had no ambition. You were embarrassed to bring me to events. You divorced me because you needed more than this. Your words, not mine. Callum stepped forward, trying to assert himself into a conversation he didn't understand. Look, I don't know what history you two have, but Victoria's moved on. We're getting married. She doesn't need... Marcus turned to him, and whatever Callum saw in that gaze made him step back. You earn $400,000 a year. It wasn't a question. Victoria thinks that makes you successful. She posted about finally being with someone who can provide. Congratulations, you provide. I make good money. I make that much every 3 hours through passive portfolio returns. Good money is relative. Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in our entire relationship, I'm being completely honest. We can start over. The desperation in her voice was almost painful to hear. Now that I know, now that we both know, we can try again. Marcus had expected this, had rehearsed responses, but standing here, looking at a woman who'd spent 12 months convinced she'd upgraded from a failure, all his prepared speeches felt unnecessary. No, Victoria, we can't. Why not? Because now you know I have money, and you'll never be able to convince me, or yourself, that you love me instead of what I represent. I tested you, you failed, and that test can't be retaken with different answers. I did love you. You loved the idea of me becoming someone better, someone your parents would approve of, someone who could afford the life you thought you deserved. He paused. The tragedy is, I could have given you everything, the houses, the cars, the social status, but I needed to know you'd love me without those things. And you couldn't. That's not fair. You lied by omission. I withheld information. You withheld respect. We're not the same. Tears streamed down Victoria's face now, taking mascara with them. Around them, the ballroom had gone quiet. People weren't even pretending not to watch. Phones were out. Cameras captured everything. Tomorrow, this would be on every tech blog and social media platform. The billionaire who hid as a mechanic, the wife who divorced him without knowing, the public confrontation at a high-profile event. Victoria would become a cautionary tale, a meme, the woman who'd valued appearances over substance and paid for it in the most public way possible. Marcus felt no satisfaction in that, just exhaustion. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I came here because Landon Pierce deserved to thank his investor publicly. If you happened to be in the room when that happened, that's not revenge. That's just unfortunate timing. I don't believe you. I don't need you to believe me. I need you to leave me alone." He turned and walked away. Behind him, Victoria made a sound that might have been his name, or might have been just grief. Callum's voice rose, angry and defensive, saying something about disrespect and moving on. Marcus didn't look back. He walked through the ballroom, past tables full of people who now saw him completely differently than they had 30 minutes ago. Past servers offering champagne he no longer wanted. Past the windows showing Seattle's lights spreading toward the horizon. Rowan met him near the exit. That was rough. That was necessary. Same thing? No, but close enough. They rode the elevator down in silence. The Phantom was waiting at the curb, engine running, chauffeur standing at attention. Marcus settled into the leather seats and closed his eyes. His phone buzzed. Sienna. Bloomberg hit 140,000 viewers. "You're trending on Twitter. Are you okay?" He typed back. "I'm fine, just tired." Good tired or bad tired? Honest tired. First time in 12 years. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Marcus pocketed the phone. The Phantom glided through Seattle traffic, heading back to the Four Seasons, where Marcus would sleep in a bed that cost more per night than his apartment's monthly rent. Tomorrow his face would be everywhere. Tomorrow, journalists would dig into his past, trace Titan Holdings' investments, calculate exactly how much he'd accumulated while living as someone forgettable. Tomorrow, Victoria would wake up to the full weight of what she'd lost. But tonight, Marcus was just tired. The kind of tired that came from finally setting down a burden you'd carried so long you'd forgotten it was heavy. The Phantom turned onto Fifth Avenue. Through the window, Marcus watched the city pass. Restaurants and boutiques and galleries where people lived their visible lives, where wealth was performed rather than hidden. He was done hiding. Whatever came next, he'd face it as himself. The car pulled up to the Four Seasons. The chauffeur opened the door. Marcus stepped out into Seattle's cool October night, a billionaire in a tuxedo, finally visible after 12 years in shadow. It felt exactly as lonely as he'd expected, and exactly as necessary as he'd hoped. The video hit 2 million views by sunrise. Marcus woke to his phone vibrating against the nightstand with the persistence of something that couldn't be ignored. He'd silenced notifications before sleeping, but the sheer volume of incoming messages made the device rattle like an alarm clock designed by sadists. He didn't reach for it immediately, just lay there in the presidential suite's king bed, watching dawn paint the Cascade Mountains in shades of pink and gold, and considered what it meant to be visible again. 12 years of careful invisibility, erased in 8 minutes of Bloomberg livestream. His face was now attached to his fortune. His name was searchable. The architecture he'd built to separate Marcus the person from Marcus the portfolio had collapsed into a single, unavoidable truth. Finally, he picked up the phone. The text from Rowan had arrived at 6:47 a.m. Forbes front page, TechCrunch lead story. Bloomberg running a deep dive on Titan Holdings. Your Wikipedia page was created at 4 a.m. and has been edited 37 times. Also, Dutch called. He saw the news. Marcus sat up. Dutch. Of course Dutch had seen it. Everyone had seen it. He scrolled through the messages. Reporters requesting interviews. Venture capitalists suggesting coffee meetings. Founders pitching startups. 3 different wealth managers offering to optimize his portfolio. A publicist from Los Angeles claiming she could manage the narrative. And Victoria, 43 text messages from Victoria, starting at 11:37 p.m. and continuing until 5:12 a.m. Marcus didn't read them, just scrolled past, watching the timestamps accumulate like evidence of something broken, trying to reassemble itself in the dark. Near the bottom, a message from Sienna. Dad, you're famous. Like, actually famous. My friends are texting me asking if you're the Marcus Hartwell from the Morrison thing. I told them you're just my dad who happens to have decent taste in startups. Love you. Call when you can. Marcus smiled despite the weight settling into his chest. Called her immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the bright energy of someone who'd been awake for hours, despite it being barely 7 on a Saturday. You're trending on 3 platforms simultaneously. Do you have any idea how hard that is? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Good morning, newly famous billionaire father. How does it feel to have your net worth as the second result when people Google your name? Invasive. Good. You spent 12 years hiding. Now you get to experience what the rest of us deal with. Being known. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Seriously though, are you okay? Marcus moved to the window. Seattle was waking up below him. Commuters on their way to farmers markets. Runners circling Green Lake. People living their visible lives without the burden of accumulated wealth hiding beneath coveralls. I'm okay. Tired, but okay. I saw the video, the part where you confronted Victoria. Dad, that was, she searched for the right word, necessary. She needed to see what she'd thrown away. I didn't do it for revenge. I know, you did it for truth. But sometimes truth looks a lot like justice, and justice looks a lot like revenge. And maybe those things aren't as different as we pretend. Wisdom from a 16-year-old. Marcus wondered when his daughter had become smarter than him, then realized she'd probably always been. He'd just been too busy protecting her to notice. They talked for 20 minutes about everything and nothing. Her Stanford interview next week. Whether Marcus should hire a publicist. What it meant that Dutch had called. Normal conversation wrapped around abnormal circumstances. The way families adapted to whatever reality they'd been handed. After hanging up, Marcus showered and dressed. Jeans and a simple button-down. No suit, no performance. The man in the mirror looked like someone between identities. Not quite the mechanic anymore. Not yet comfortable being the visible billionaire. His phone rang again. Dutch Kovacs. Marcus answered. Hey, Dutch. Marcus, or should I call you Mr. Hartwell now? The older man's voice carried something between amusement and betrayal. Saw you on the news. Bloomberg, Forbes, even the damn local NBC affiliate. My best mechanic is worth $800 million. I'm still your mechanic. Are you? Because I'm thinking a guy who owns that much probably doesn't need to change oil for $40 an hour. Marcus heard the hurt beneath the humor. Dutch had given him work when he'd asked for it, had trusted him with customers and responsibilities, had treated him like any other employee. Now he was learning that every interaction had been built on incomplete information. Dutch, I took the job because I needed something real. The money, it's just numbers and accounts I rarely look at. The work at your garage was the only thing in my life that felt honest. Was? Past tense? Is, if you'll still have me. Silence on the other end. Then, Monday morning, 8 a.m., Camry needs new brakes, you're on it. I'll be there. But Marcus, next time you're worth close to $1 billion, maybe mention it during the interview. Would have asked for better references. The joke landed soft, but it landed. The friendship hadn't broken, just bent under unexpected weight. After the call, Marcus ordered breakfast from room service, scrambled eggs and coffee, nothing elaborate, and finally opened his laptop. The Forbes article was detailed and surprisingly accurate, tracing Titan Holdings investments over 12 years, calculating returns, estimating Marcus's personal wealth at somewhere north of $900 million, when factoring in real estate and other holdings. The TechCrunch piece focused on the companies he'd saved. Morrison Biogenetics was just the most recent. Before that, he'd funded an AI startup that later sold to Google for $700 million. A clean energy company now publicly traded at a $3 billion valuation. A medical device manufacturer that had created prosthetics used in 40 countries. 43 companies total, 28 successful exits. Only 4 complete failures. The Bloomberg deep dive was more invasive, digging into his past as Hartwell Ventures, the liquidation after Celeste's death, the disappearance that had sparked rumors for years. They'd found sources, former employees, old colleagues, who remembered Marcus as brilliant but intense, someone who'd walked away from success at its peak for reasons no one understood. The articles mentioned Victoria only briefly, though social media had no such restraint. Twitter threads dissected the confrontation. Reddit communities analyzed every word. Instagram memes compared before and after photos. Marcus in coveralls next to Marcus in the Tom Ford tuxedo, captioned with variations on how it started versus how it's going. Victoria herself had gone silent. Her Instagram account was private now. Her last public post, the one about Callum being everything she'd been waiting for, had been deleted. Marcus wondered if she was reading the same articles, seeing her choices reduced to cautionary tale, watching strangers debate whether she was victim or villain. Probably both. Like everyone in stories complicated enough to be true. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown Seattle number. He almost declined, then recognized the prefix. Ashford Properties. Margaret Ashford's voice came through crisp and cold. Mr. Hartwell, I believe we need to speak. Do we? My daughter is devastated. She's been crying for hours. She wants to see you, to apologize, to... Mrs. Ashford, your daughter divorced me because she thought I wasn't successful enough for her standards. That was her choice. I'm sorry she regrets it. I'm sorry the consequences arrived publicly, but I'm not responsible for managing her feelings. You deliberately humiliated her at a public event in front of hundreds of people. I revealed my identity at an event celebrating a company I invested in. Victoria being there was coincidence, not strategy. You expect me to believe that? Marcus moved to the window again. Seattle spread below, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in expensive hotel suites. I expect you to believe I spent 18 months married to your daughter while your family treated me like an embarrassment. I expect you to remember that you gave her a $15,000 handbag for Christmas and gave me a $40 sweater from Target. I expect you to acknowledge that you told her she needed someone on her level while I was standing 20 feet away, pretending not to hear. Silence. Then quieter. I didn't know who you were. That's the point, Mrs. Ashford. You didn't know who I was. You just knew I wasn't rich enough to matter. And now that you know I am, suddenly I'm worth apologizing to. Suddenly, I deserve respect. He paused. That proves I was right to hide. Because people like you don't see character. You see balance sheets. That's not... It's exactly fair, and it's true. Which is why Victoria and I can't start over. Because now she knows about the money, and every feeling she has from this moment forward will be tainted by that knowledge. She'll never be able to prove she loves me instead of what I represent. I've taken that possibility away from both of us. You're punishing her for being human. No, I'm protecting myself from being loved for the wrong reasons. Again. He ended the call, blocked the number, felt nothing except a distant exhaustion that came from having the same argument in different configurations. The hotel phone rang, the landline, which meant someone had convinced the front desk to put them through. Marcus answered. Victoria's voice, raw from crying. Marcus, please just talk to me. We talked last night. Not like this, not when I was in shock and you were angry. Just coffee. 1 hour. Let me explain. Explain what? That you married me thinking I was poor and divorced me for the same reason? I understand that perfectly. I didn't know what I was doing. I was confused and my family was pressuring me, and I thought you didn't have ambition, but now I see you had more ambition than anyone. You were just quiet about it. Victoria, this isn't about ambition. It's about respect. You didn't respect me when you thought I fixed cars for a living. Now you want me back because you know I'm rich. That's not love. That's opportunism. That's cruel. It's honest. And I'm done being anything else. One coffee, 1 hour. If you still feel the same way after, I'll leave you alone forever. Marcus closed his eyes, thought about Celeste wrapping her Lamborghini around a cliff because she couldn't distinguish between wanting and needing. Thought about Victoria's face last night, horror and recognition and desperate recalculation. Thought about the simple cruelty of loving people who only love the costume. No, please. I spent 18 months testing you, Victoria. Every day I gave you the chance to love me without money as a factor. You failed every single test. I'm not giving you another chance now that you know the truth. That wouldn't prove anything except that you like rich men better than poor ones. I already knew that. You're not being fair. Life isn't fair. You taught me that when you handed me $50,000 and thought you were being generous. He hung up, unplugged the hotel phone, sat in the silence of the suite and felt the weight of permanent decisions settling into his bones. By Monday morning, the media storm had evolved from breaking news into analysis. Think pieces about wealth and deception, debates about whether Marcus had been ethical in hiding his fortune, psychological profiles attempting to explain why someone would choose poverty cosplay over visible success. Marcus ignored all of it, drove his F-150 to Dutch's Auto Repair at 7:45 a.m., parked in the same spot he'd used for 3 years, and walked into the garage wearing coveralls that smelled like oil and hard work. Dutch was in the office, feet up on the desk, drinking coffee from a mug that read, "World's Okayest Boss." "You actually showed up." I said I would. "Yeah, but rich people say lots of things. Doesn't mean they do them." Marcus picked up the work order for the Camry. "I'm still the same person I was last week, Dutch." "Are you?" "Because last week you were my mechanic who showed up on time and did good work. This week you're a billionaire slumming with the working class. Those are different people." "Not to me." Dutch studied him over the rim of his mug. "You know what bothers me most? Not that you're rich. That's fine, good for you. What bothers me is that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. 3 years, Marcus. We've had beers together. You came to my daughter's wedding, and the whole time you were lying." "I wasn't lying. I was protecting something." "What?" "The ability to be judged on who I am instead of what I have." "And you think I would have judged you?" Marcus set down the work order. "Everyone judges, Dutch. It's human nature. Money changes how people see you, changes what they want from you. I needed one place in my life where I was just a guy who fixed cars." Dutch was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Fair enough, but Marcus, you don't get to keep playing that game now. Everyone knows. So either you're here because you want to be, or you're here because you're running from something else. Figure out which it is." He left Marcus alone in the garage. The Camry waited in Bay 3, patient and uncomplicated. Marcus rolled the creeper underneath, examined the brake pads, worn down to metal, dangerous, the kind of negligence that killed people, and began the simple work of keeping strangers safe. This was real. The expensive suits in charity galas and investment portfolios, those were abstract. But brake pads either worked or they didn't. Oil either lubricated or it seized. Cars either ran or they broke down. There was honesty in mechanical systems that didn't exist in human ones. By noon, he'd finished the Camry, changed oil on 2 Hondas, and diagnosed a failing alternator on a Ford Escape. His hands were black with grease, his coverall stained with fluids in 3 shades of automotive. He looked exactly like what he was, a mechanic doing the work. But when customers came to pick up their cars, they stared, recognized him from the news, asked for selfies, autographs, confirmation that yes, this was really the billionaire who'd been on Bloomberg. Marcus obliged with patient grace, then returned to work. But the simplicity was gone. The anonymity that had made this place sacred was shattered. He was visible here now too, visible everywhere. At 3 p.m., Dutch found him organizing tools in the back room. "You can't keep doing this." Marcus looked up. "Doing what?" "Pretending you're still just a mechanic. You're not. Everyone knows you're not. And every time someone comes in here and treats you like a celebrity instead of an employee, it disrupts my business. I can handle it. I know you can, but I can't. This is my shop, Marcus. I need it to function like a shop, not a tourist attraction for people who want to meet the billionaire in coveralls." The words landed with finality. Marcus had known this was coming, had felt it the moment he decided to reveal himself. But hearing it spoken aloud still carried weight. "You're firing me. I'm telling you that you outgrew this place the moment you stepped on that stage. You just haven't accepted it yet." Marcus set down the wrench he'd been holding, looked around the garage, the tools hanging in neat rows, the lifts that had held hundreds of cars, the oil-stained concrete that had been his sanctuary for 3 years. "This was the only real thing in my life, Dutch." "Then find something else real. But stop trying to fit into a space you've outgrown. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me." They shook hands. No hard feelings, just the acknowledgement that some transformations were irreversible. Marcus gathered his personal items, a coffee mug, a photograph of Sienna, a worn paperback he'd been reading during lunch breaks, and walked out of Dutch's auto repair for the last time. The F-150 sat in the parking lot, old and faithful, and suddenly absurd. A truck worth $6,000 owned by a man worth $900 million. The math didn't work anymore. He drove back to Portland through autumn rain, the windshield wipers beating rhythm against questions he couldn't answer. Who was he now, if not the mechanic who'd chosen simplicity? What was left when you'd tested everyone in your life and they'd all failed? The penthouse felt different when Marcus entered at 4:30 p.m. Not physically changed, same furniture, same views, same Rothko bleeding reds on the wall, but psychologically transformed. This was no longer the secret second life he maintained apart from his public persona. This was just his life, singular, visible, unavoidable. Rowan was waiting in the office, laptop open, tie loosened. He looked like he'd been fielding calls for hours. "Welcome back to the visible world. How was the garage?" "Over. Dutch asked me not to come back." "Can't blame him. You were disrupting his business model by being more interesting than the cars." Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan, neat. "What's the damage?" Rowan pulled up a spreadsheet. "Depends on what you mean. Financially? Morrison Biogenetics closed Friday at $46. Your stake appreciated by $63 million over the weekend. Personally, you've received 347 interview requests, 2 marriage proposals from strangers, and 1 cease and desist from Victoria's attorney claiming harassment." Harassment? She's claiming that your public revelation was intentionally designed to humiliate her, that you knew she'd be at the event and revealed yourself anyway to cause emotional distress. Marcus laughed, sharp, bitter, the sound of someone who'd expected exactly this. "She's threatening legal action because I told the truth about myself at an event celebrating a company I invested in?" That's the claim. Her attorney argues you could have declined Landon's invitation, could have asked him to keep your identity private. By choosing to reveal yourself, knowing Victoria would be present, you engaged in targeted harassment. That's insane. That's litigation, and it'll go nowhere, but it'll be expensive and public and annoying. Rowan closed the laptop. "Marcus, I have to ask, did you know she'd be there?" "Yes." "And you went anyway?" "I went because Landon Pierce deserved to thank his investor. Victoria's presence was irrelevant to that decision. Was it? Marcus met Rowan's eyes. What are you asking? I'm asking if any part of you, even a small part, wanted her to see, wanted her to understand what she'd lost. The question hung in the air between them. Marcus sipped his whiskey, felt it burn down his throat, and considered honesty. Maybe, but wanting someone to know the truth isn't the same as wanting revenge. I didn't reveal myself to hurt her. I revealed myself to stop hiding. If those two things intersected in a way that caused her pain, that's unfortunate, but not my responsibility. A judge might disagree. Then let them disagree in court. I'm not settling. I'm not apologizing. I told the truth. If that truth was inconvenient for Victoria, she should have made different choices when she had the chance. Rowan nodded, accepting this. What now? Marcus walked to the window. Portland spread below in its afternoon light, the city indifferent to the small dramas of wealthy men in tall buildings. Now I figure out who I am when I'm not hiding, when everyone knows, when there's no test to fail because the answer's already public. That sounds lonely. Probably, but at least it's honest. 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Marcus hired a publicist despite hating the idea, gave 3 carefully selected interviews. The journalists seemed disappointed he wasn't more bitter. They wanted revenge narratives. Marcus gave them philosophy instead. Do you regret marrying Victoria? The Forbes journalist asked. I regret that she couldn't see past what she thought I lacked, but I don't regret trying. The quote went viral, became a meme. Marcus hated being reduced to sound bites, but understood this was the price of visibility. Victoria tried to reach him 11 more times. Calls, texts, emails, even a handwritten letter delivered by courier. Marcus read it once. Marcus, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I failed every test you gave me, but I'm asking, begging for one more chance. Not to be together, just to talk, to apologize properly. Please, Victoria. He burned the letter in his fireplace, watched it turn to ash, felt nothing except distant sadness for the woman who'd married a man in coveralls and divorced a billionaire, never understanding they were the same person. One Friday evening, 4 weeks after the IPO event, Marcus sat alone in his penthouse watching the sun set over Portland. His phone showed 42 unread messages, interview requests, investment pitches, people who wanted something. He was about to power it down when an unfamiliar number appeared. Local area code, he answered despite himself. Mr. Hartwell? My name is Jessica Brennan. I know you don't know me, but I saw the Bloomberg coverage. The whole story about testing your ex-wife, about wanting to be loved for who you are. She paused. I went through something similar, different details, same wound. And I thought, maybe you'd understand what it's like to be valuable for the wrong reasons. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. I do understand. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Not a date, just 2 people who know something specific about each other. He thought about Sienna's words. When does the fear stop? Thought about Dutch telling him to find something else real. Thought about the choice between safety and honesty, between hiding and being seen. Coffee sounds good. They exchanged numbers, made plans for Thursday afternoon. After hanging up, Marcus stood at the window and watched Portland's lights begin to glow as darkness settled. Maybe Jessica would turn out to be another Victoria. Maybe she'd love him for the wrong reasons. Maybe this was just another test destined to fail. Or maybe, and this felt dangerous to consider, maybe she'd just be a person, flawed and honest in trying to navigate the same impossible questions. He didn't know, couldn't know. That was the point. The only way to find out was to stop testing, to be completely visible, to accept that being known meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant risking hurt, and risking hurt was the price of being human. Marcus pulled out his phone, typed a message to Jessica. Thursday, 3 p.m. There's a cafe in the Pearl District that makes excellent coffee and doesn't care who you are. Her response came quickly. Perfect. Looking forward to it. He set down the phone, looked at the Rothko on his wall. Chaos organized into something that suggested meaning without promising it. That painting had cost $500,000. It was beautiful. It was valuable. It was utterly incapable of loving him back. But Jessica might, or she might not. And the only way to discover which was to show up Thursday, drink coffee, and risk being known. For the first time in 4 weeks, Marcus felt something other than exhaustion. Not quite hope, but close enough to matter, close enough to try. Outside, Portland settled into night. The city didn't care about his money, or his past, or his carefully constructed tests. It just existed, full of people living their imperfect lives, trying to find connection in a world that made authentic love nearly impossible. Marcus was one of them now. Visible, vulnerable, human. It was terrifying. It was necessary. And somewhere in that intersection, he thought he might finally find something real. Thursday couldn't come fast enough.